Alrighty. So, good evening, everyone. We are so excited to have you all here this evening for our first monthly youth webinar. Before we continue, could I ask you, if you haven't already, please mute your microphone for now. No need to worry or stress. We will have some open discussion later on during our questions period and our game. For tonight's game, you will need 8 sticky notes or 8 pieces of paper, along with something to write with or markers. I wanted to give everyone lots of time to find something you could use, so I thought I'd let everyone know right now before we start, if you need a minute. And for those who don't know me, my name's Waverly Gadet, and I'm the communications coordinator here at KMK. A little bit about myself is I came on KMK as a student and have been here ever since. So for about 4 years now, approximately. I've worked on many files such as archaeology and all that good stuff, but I primarily work with youth in the communications team, and right now I'm a part of the governance and justice team also. In saying that, I'm also from Glooscap First Nation in the Valley. I want to welcome and thank all the youth for joining us this evening. These webinars are solely for you and based on the youth interest. Throughout this journey, we'll dive into our different departments here at KMK, along with other subjects we heard youth are interested in. This journey will be filled with learning, fun, and opportunities for you as a youth. In saying that, our first subject is to speak about the Mi'kmaq Rights Initiative and what it actually is. This leads me to introduce our first speaker of the night, Crystal Dory, the communications coordinator here at KMK, and I'll pass it along to Crystal to introduce herself and start this discussion.
Thanks, Wave. I'm just trying to see if I can master sharing my screen. Oh, can you see my presentation? Lovely,
Yes.
lovely. Great. So thanks for the introduction. Hi, everyone. My name is Crystal Dory, as Wave had said. I'm the Director of Communications here at KMK. I am from Millbrook First Nation, and that's actually where I am right now in my office. Our office is located in the Millbrook Power Center. So tonight we thought we'd start where this is the first youth webinar, just talking a little bit about who KMK is, what we do, and a bit about the Assembly of Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Chiefs. So I'm going to get into it, and I'll start by talking about the Assembly because maybe not everybody knows who they are. So the Assembly of Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Chiefs work together to make the best possible decisions for the Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia. Current membership is 11 of the 13 Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Chiefs, and they have ex officio members that include the Grand Chief and the G Captain of the Mi'kmaq Grand Council, 2 district chiefs representing the Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaq and the Union of Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq, and also sitting at the table is the Assembly of First Nations Regional Chief for Nova Scotia. So ex officio just basically means that they're members, they provide information and feedback and guidance, but when it comes to voting on resolutions or major decisions, the voting lies with the chiefs who are members of the assembly. So they are not a voting member. And I was wrong. I said current membership is 11. Current membership is 12. My apologies. 12 of the 13 Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq chiefs. So the Assembly is the self-governing body for the purposes of the administration of self-government, not through any policy by the federal or provincial government, but through the assertion of our rights under Section 35 of the Constitution. They meet on a regular basis to discuss the implementation of Mi'kmaq rights and title and any other issues that may affect them as a collective. The Assembly's work is separate from that of each chief and council. We know what our chief and councils do in our community. They're very busy working on things that affect us in our own communities. The Assembly looks at things on the broader perspective. So basically what is happening for the nation, the entire Mi'kmaq nation in Nova Scotia. We all know how important our treaty rights are to us as Mi'kmaq. So I want to give a bit of a history to help explain who KMK is and what we do. You probably all know about the court cases like the Marshall fishing case, the logging cases, as well as other important landmark court cases that talk about our treaty rights. And even though we were winning in courtrooms, as a nation, we all quickly realized that the governments or the courts on their own were not and should not be deciding how the Mi'kmaq would implement their rights. So exploratory talks began on how the Mi'kmaq leadership could create a process where we could talk to Nova Scotia and Canada about how the Mi'kmaq would implement our treaty and Aboriginal rights. In October 1998, Canada, Nova Scotia, and the Mi'kmaq agreed to begin discussions on building this process. The Mi'kmaq began drafting an umbrella agreement that talked about the need for the Mi'kmaq, Nova Scotia, and Canada to come together to discuss issues about rights, lands, and resources. In January 2001, the federal and provincial governments agreed to join us in this process. This was a major breakthrough for the Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia. For the first time, the Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia and the federal and provincial governments agreed to sit at the same table and work through things. After much talk with the communities, chief and council, and different levels of government, this agreement was formally signed on June 7th, 2002. And the umbrella agreement became a tool to consider the constitutionally protected rights of the Mi'kmaq and talked about the importance of developing a formal consultation process. So basically, the umbrella agreement became a commitment for all of these parties to work together in good faith. It took another 5+ years to develop the framework agreement, or really that is the plan for how they would actually work through these important issues. This became known as the Made in Nova Scotia process. The Made in Nova Scotia process was created after extensive research and community discussions, where the contents of this agreement was developed completely by the Mi'kmaq leadership and reviewed by chiefs, councils, and community members. It was clear from the community that this process would have to be different from what others were doing in the rest of Canada. Our process would need to focus on how the rights of the Mi'kmaq would be properly put into effect or implemented to ensure that every Mi'kmaq could exercise their rights. As Mi'kmaq, we hold Aboriginal rights and title to our traditional territory. We have never ceded rights or title, and our peace and friendship treaties reiterate that. This process became a tool to address those treaty obligations. The Made in Nova Scotia process outlined the entire rights implementation process, including the types of things that we would talk about, what we hope to achieve, and the procedures that we would take, and the timelines for this work. What was clear in the development of the Made in Nova Scotia process was that Aboriginal and Mi'kmaq rights and title had to be protected. The chiefs and the lawyers who drafted the agreement were sure to include those protections through the many legal clauses within the agreement. To support this work, the chiefs developed the 5 pillars or statements of Mi'kmaq values to guide not only the Made in Nova Scotia process, but they continue to be at the heart of what we do today. In fact, we actually have each of these pillars hanging on a sign in our boardroom for everyone to see when they enter our boardroom here at our office. Those pillars are, number 1, to achieve recognition, acceptance, implementation, and protection of treaty, title, and other rights of the Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia. Number 2, to develop systems of Mi'kmaq governance and resource management. Number 3, to revive, promote, and protect a healthy Mi'kmaq identity. Number 4, to obtain the basis for a shared economy and social development. And number 5, to negotiate towards these goals with community involvement and support. So you may be wondering, why do we even need to develop this process? Why couldn't the Mi'kmaq just go out and exercise their rights? Honestly, the easiest answer is that there are, I think now, over 18,000 Mi'kmaq living in Nova Scotia, and we all know that there's only a limited amount of resources like moose, lobster, birch bark, just as examples. So our rights are not only about how we can harvest, but also how we can ensure that these resources are protected for future generations. Implementing and exercising our rights is not just about what we can access today, but it's also about co-management and how the Mi'kmaq should be monitors of the resources now and for future generations. It's important that the Mi'kmaq work together to create rules and build a way forward that everyone can agree to and accept. While we have rights as a Mi'kmaq, they are collective rights that are shared by the nation. And I think that's really important to note. I often heard G Captain say, you know, with rights comes responsibility. And as Mi'kmaq, we have rights. Absolutely. We have the right to go do things as an individual, but they are rights that are shared collectively by the nation. So we also have a responsibility to ensure that we're doing things in the proper way and thinking about the next 7 generations. So through the development of the Made in Nova Scotia process, Gwilmukmaglusawahan was established. That's our office. KMK was created to oversee the rights implementation and consultation processes, again, between the Mi'kmaq, the province of Nova Scotia, and the government of Canada. I think it's important to note here that Gwilmukmaglusawahan means we are seeking consensus. So our job is to really take things, go out, talk to communities, hear from our leadership, and find out what the majority of people think and find ways that we can help the Mi'kmaq implement their rights and protect the environment and do things that they want to do with on the lands, waters, and with the resources that the majority of Mi'kmaq are happy with. So basically, we're just the organization that does the work that the chiefs had agreed to do. Since we were established, we have also become a lot like the administrative arm or the secretariat for the Assembly of Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Chiefs. On our team, we have archaeologists, policy analysts, lawyers, and individuals who are doing research on things like lands and fisheries, governance, wildlife, as well as historical items. And then you get our department, communications. And our job is to take everything that all those people are doing and make it pretty and make it understandable to our community members and to put it out so that people know what's going on. And to help bring together sessions like this. So as I said, like we work to help the chiefs on collective nation issues. KMK currently has 10 Mi'kmaq communities that we support and work on behalf of. But our work isn't to benefit any one community individually. Sure, we do things to help communities, to help them move things forward. But really our priority is for the Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia as a whole. Our goal is to see that the rights of the Mi'kmaq, both Aboriginal and treaty rights, be implemented to ensure that every Mi'kmaq can exercise those rights, free from the threat of being charged, free from the threats of having their gear or equipment seized, and free from the threats of being harassed by other levels of government. We have treaties that are acknowledged in the Canadian Constitution. We have pre-Confederation treaties that were here, that our ancestors fought for and worked very hard to see that were there long before Canada was a country. And I said it before, and I can't say it enough, we have never ceded the rights or titles to our land, waters, and resources. That is so important to the nation and so crucial to what we do as an organization. So since I started at KMK almost 12 years ago, we have grown from a very small team. I think there was 12 people when I started to now being a team of 50 people. We have offices in Eskasoni and Millbrook and representatives working for us from, I think, almost every single one of the Mi'kmaq communities in Nova Scotia. We also have satellite offices, thanks to COVID, right across the province. So we have people who know this province well. And our job is to look at how the Mi'kmaq can implement their treaty and Aboriginal rights today. How we can ensure that we as Mi'kmaq are seen and recognized as co-managers of the resources, not only for us, but for the generations who will follow. Through the Made in Nova Scotia process, a terms of reference for a Mi'kmaq Nova Scotia Canada consultation process was also created. The courts have said that the Crown, which is now the federal and provincial government, they say the Crown because at one point in time it was the British Crown. But when Canada became a country, those duties were divided between the federal and provincial government. but we still say the Crown. The Crown has a duty to consult with Indigenous nations when they are taking action or considering action that could impact rights and title. So the consultation department at our office works to determine if there are impacts to Mi'kmaq rights and title on any of the projects that are happening in Nova Scotia. So from the records they keep, the conversations they have with community members, the historic evidence they've been able to collect, their job is to look at a project, examine what the impacts could be, and to let the federal or provincial government know that, depending on where the consultation came from. In their department, they have people working on energy, forestry, archaeology, transportation, and mining, just as examples. Through their work, they've been able to see archaeological investigations take place so that our cultural heritage is protected on certain sites. They've been able to see that endangered species of plants and trees be moved to help their survival from sites. An example of that is I know on one project site, there was a stand of black ash trees, which black ash are so very important to the Mi'kmaq. It was actually the preferred material used for a lot of our basket making and is now I think it's an endangered species as far as I know, or a species at risk in Nova Scotia. So they were able to dig up an entire stand of the black ash trees and move them to the Millbrook Cultural Center, which is right next door to me. And it's outside of their building now, just to try to keep those species alive because they are so important to us. They've had Mi'kmaq monitors hired for projects to oversee and have Mi'kmaq eyes on a project to make sure that the things are happening the way we would want them. And in some cases, they've even been able to demand that projects stop or things stop. It's not a veto process, unfortunately. Unfortunately, we can't go to the government and say the Mi'kmaq are against this can't happen. We can say that, but the consultation process really doesn't give us any power in that regards to do that. So that's when we involve the Assembly of Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Chiefs. They help us. They are the power. They help us to push that forward and push that messaging to the government. An example of that is fracking in Nova Scotia. They were looking at doing fracking a number of years ago. There was conversations about it, and the Mi'kmaq were saying, no way, not happening. We don't want that on our lands. And we were able to push that through consultation and with the chiefs' support and them pushing the government on a political level, we were able to help Nova Scotia put a moratorium in place that there would be no fracking in Nova Scotia. So that was a big win for us. So on that, I'd like to give just a bit of a quick overview of some of the very important milestones that we've accomplished at KMK over the years. I'll start with lands and forestry. In 2012, community representatives gathered to examine lands throughout Nova Scotia and to provide traditional and current insight into how we use these lands and continue to use these lands from a cultural perspective. The province was looking at taking 12% of their lands and protecting them. So we brought together a bunch of knowledge holders and land users, and the province came in and did their presentation and talked about how they were looking at protecting lands. We heard their goals and their kind of priorities, and then we said, thank you very much. We asked them to leave the room because the conversations that happen with the Mi'kmaq should stay with the Mi'kmaq, and that is very important to us. And I was very honored and privy to be in that room where we then got to look at maps and got to talk to our elders and knowledge holders and land users and say, where are the places that you harvest plants? Where do you get your trees? Where do you hunt? And where would you like to see areas protected? And they were able to kind of point out some of the places that were very special to the Mi'kmaq today and historically. And we shared those lands, not necessarily how the lands were used, but the lands that were pointed out to us. And some of those lands were included in the 12% protected lands, which we were very, very happy to see. So it was nice to see the province coming together with the Mi'kmaq on that. Work has also been done to set aside 30,000 hectares for forestry management and for a Mi'kmaq forestry initiative. This initiative was created so that the Mi'kmaq could build a solid, holistic foundation to move forward in a Mi'kmaq way into the forestry sector. We all know as Mi'kmaq how bad clear cutting is and nothing that we would ever support in our forestries. So we have used this opportunity and these lands to create a Mi'kmaq way forward for our forest. And I think that is so important and exciting. We also have developed our own harvester identification system to determine who has the right to harvest in Nova Scotia, taking back that authority from the federal government. We heard clear from community that the only people who can determine who is a member of the nation are the people themselves. And that is why we created the Woolaniginu process. We knew that the community members who had status cards and who were a member of their band had the right to harvest. They were Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia. But there are others in the area who don't have status cards for any number of reasons, but they are Mi'kmaq. They're connected to our families, they're connected to our communities, and we wanted to ensure that they were also part of our nation. So through the Woolaniginu process, they could apply to have a harvester identification card and be recognized as a Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia by the Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia. And I think that that was so important, and so do the chiefs. So we're happy that is out there and is going well. In 2012, we signed an interim arrangement with Parks Canada to provide the Mi'kmaq of Nova Scotia with free access to Kejimkujik National Park and National Historic Site, the Cape Breton Highlands National Park, and to the Fortress of Louisbourg. This agreement also discussed the protection of cultural resources, the establishment of a Mi'kmaq advisory committee, and a commitment to consultation by Parks Canada. In 2014, this agreement was extended to include all national parks and national historic sites in Nova Scotia. On the slide is a picture of the vehicle identifier. So if you or your family doesn't have one and you want to go visit any of our parks and spend the day in the parks, this will get you free entry to the parks. So you can go to your local band office and get one, and or you can use your status card at the gates of any park and they will ensure that you get in for free. And we're very, very proud of that. Also noted on this slide is the work that our office did on behalf of the Assembly to see that Sable Island was named a National Park Reserve, which is a designation used when there are outstanding claims by Aboriginal people regarding Aboriginal rights and title. And these claims have been accepted by Canada for negotiation. So it was big for us. We knew that the Mi'kmaq had a history on Sable Island, but to have Canada recognize that by designating Sable Island as a National Parks Reserve was big for us. You can see on the bottom, there's some really cool pictures from Sable Island. I was very, very lucky to be able to travel to Sable Island in 2013. Wave went, I think, last year or a couple years ago. It is an amazing place to visit, and I was so fortunate to be able to go. So I think what was big for me and a big takeaway is that we were the first group for our office to get to go to the Sable Island. On the picture in the picture in the middle is Twyla Gadet, our director of consultation, Dr. Heather McLeod Leslie, our senior archaeologist in the middle, and myself. And what will stay with me to this day is when the representatives from Parks Canada said to both Twyla and myself, how does it feel? How does it feel knowing that you might be the first Mi'kmaq on this island since your ancestors were here? I'll tell you, that's a feeling that will stay with me for the rest of my life, because how incredible is that to know that, you know, yes, there's been scientists and yes, there's been people doing work on Sable Island, but there is a possibility, because they don't necessarily know everybody that has always gone over, but there's a possibility that Twyla and I could have been the first Mi'kmaq back on that island since our ancestors were there. Pretty frickin' cool. So here in Nova Scotia, many people think of fisheries as either commercial or sports and recreational activity, but for the Mi'kmaq, we all know it's a way of our life. Our formal legal counsel and lead negotiator, Bruce Wildsmith, was the lawyer for the Donald Marshall Jr. case. And in the courtroom, he and his legal team, which also included a member of our rights implementation team, Eric Shiley, They argued that in the modern context, our 1761 treaty said that we had the right to harvest and sell for necessities. And today, that would be equivalent to a moderate livelihood. The Marshall decision became paramount for the discussions on the constitutional right to a moderate livelihood. In 2020, the Mi'kmaq launched their right to fish and sell for a livelihood. Since then, many communities have developed their own treaty-protected fishery plans, which they manage and oversee. Through the formal consultation and rights implementation channels at our office, we have shared those plans with DFO. Just to be transparent, because we're nation to nation, we're trying to work nation to nation, government to government. So we have provided those plans to DFO, and while discussions with DFO are far from perfect, and that's the nice way to say it, we are now seeing Mi'kmaq fishing under these community development plans, working together to exercise their rights. And that is huge. That's a big win for us. And that's what we want to see, the Mi'kmaq implementing and exercising their treaty rights. But this isn't all the work that we're doing with the fisheries file. It is a priority for the Mi'kmaq to ensure conservation of the fisheries resources in all our rivers for today's generations and for the generations who will follow. The salmon stocks in our rivers here in Nova Scotia are at risk. In 2012, KMK worked with UINR, the Unama'ki Institute of Natural Resources, to develop the Mi'kmaq Salmon Management Plan, which is updated annually and provided to all communities so that fishers know where they can and where they shouldn't be fishing salmon to conserve this species for future generations. We are currently in the process of editing this year's postcard with the salmon fishing areas, but this is a picture of the card that we used for the last few years. The new one should be coming out very soon. The province has the Children and Family Services Act, which governs how child welfare is done in our communities. In 2015, the act underwent a reform, which resulted in over 25 legislative amendments. The changes started a dialogue on how caring for our children and families should not be under the control of the provincial government, and how the Mi'kmaq needed their own laws and policies for this. So this led to the development of the Maugalig Ginijanna initiative in October 2018. Since then, our MKK team has been developing a Mi'kmaq law for Mi'kmaq child welfare, and that's an important step in self-government. And this one is a fun one. You may also have seen these on vehicles throughout Nova Scotia. Maybe you have one on your vehicle. I have one on my car. It's the Mi'kmaq license plate. This was something that our office was very proud to work on. In 2017, on National Indigenous Peoples Day, we issued the very first Mi'kmaq license plates in Nova Scotia. It was important for us that we had another way to show residents and visitors to this province that this is the land of the Mi'kmaq. So basically, those are just a few of the very many successes we've had. There's still a long way to go. I promised Wave that I would keep this to, 25 minutes, a half hour. So I did want to highlight some of our big wins and big successes. We're always trying to think of ways to involve the youth in our work. We have had youth attend our annual Nationhood Conference over the years. If anybody listening is one of those youth, we thank you for attending. We hope you found it very interesting to hear what was going on. And this is the reason that this webinar even exists. It was because of the youth that we have decided to host this webinar. It was what you had asked for. So it's very important to us that everyone who's connected tonight or who is listening to this on a future date, that you're here, that you're listening. We want you to feel involved, be excited about what you learn throughout this webinar series. And I know Wave is working very hard to create opportunities to not only for you to learn it from us, but for us to learn from you. The work we're doing will be stepping stones that you will take in your future, and the things that you will need to build on for future generations of Mi'kmaq. And we're always mindful of that. So if you want to learn more about a project that we're working on or how you can be involved, please reach out to us. We have a contact us page on our website. We also have about KMK, so you can see everybody who's on our team and what they're doing, and you have Wave's contact information. Anyone on our team would be more than excited to hear from the youth and to get your ideas and feedback and to learn from you. So before I close, I'm going to stop sharing. I will open the floor to any questions, but because I respect our youth, what we will do is at this point in time, turn the recording off because is what will go out on YouTube and our Facebook page and stuff. But I want the youth in the room to feel comfortable and to have an open conversation. And we don't need you to be on camera for that. So I'm going to stop recording.